A few of you who saw my original Top 10 Best Video Games video asked if I had any favorites from the post-2000 era. That's a hard one for me, because even now, I have a hard time gravitating to the current generation. I guess you could say I'm stuck in the 90s. However, there are a few games a little more recent that simply didn't make the list. Once in a while, game developers can still make a game that catches my attention. The top 10 list was absolute. Every game on that list, in that specific order, is hands down what I would consider one of the greatest games ever programmed. That list is very unlikely to change. But I realize that a lot of today's gamers grew up with the current gen, so here's a list of notable mentions that I found to be very enjoyable. In no particular order, here's a top 10 list of games from 2000 onward. Number 10. This one's a great love letter to one of the best movie trilogies of all time. It's a point-and-click adventure. For something as iconic as Back to the Future, they could have told the same story and made it play more like an action game. It helped popularize the episodic format, where you download a new episode every month, and for the price tag, it's tough to beat. It's pretty long too, offering several hours of gameplay. It's outstanding that Telltale was actually able to cast Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown.
That's too bad. I bet if we could solve my younger self's problem, he'd be more inclined to listen to you.
And the guy they cast as Marty sounds exactly like Michael J. Fox. You won't even know the difference.
You're still in danger, Doc. We've got to get you out of here.
The story made me want to keep playing. There will probably never be a fourth film, so this, much like the Ghostbusters game before it, is the closest we're ever going to get to Back to the Future Part 4. And in that respect, it was memorable.
Rock on, Biff.
Number 9. This goes to show just how little of the newer games I actually get to play. For all its flaws, Sonic 4 is all about nostalgia. Even the updated graphics have a Sega Genesis spin to them, as if it never quite left the 16-bit era. Don't let the number fool you. The true Sonic 4 came in the form of Sonic and Knuckles. This is more or less a remake of the original game, with even some of the exact same level bosses and bonus levels being carried over. It's mindless, addictive platforming fun, honoring everything that made Sonic such a classic in the first place. It isn't perfect, but it's the best damn Sonic game we're going to get for a while, so I'll take what I can get. Number 8. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I haven't played too much of this one, but given how many hours I spent playing the original, this one was a blast as soon as I popped it into my PS3. Given how low the series synced with Tekken 6, it's reassuring to know that some things are better left alone. It's a bigger, faster, better-looking version of an already great fighting game. If I had one complaint, they didn't add anything completely fresh, but hey, sometimes a simple upgrade will do. Number 7. I stopped watching South Park somewhere during Season 2. It just got to be too disgusting and too outlandish. Yet here I am, playing through a game mainly because, well, it's too disgusting and too outlandish.
That was fucking hilarious!
I can't think of a better way they could have translated the show. They already had episodes where the characters role-played alternate versions of themselves. Taking a premise as simple as South Park and creating an epic fantasy using almost every reference from the show they could think of makes an excellent RPG experience.
Take it from me if you can, Wizard King. Step forward now and fulfill your
Okay, if I had my choice, I might have preferred a more action-based format like a Zelda-esque experience, but given how little I like RPGs, they made this one fairly straightforward and a blast to play. This is one of those rare occasions where the cinematic aspect is just as enjoyable as the actual gameplay. It's been said before, but this is just like playing through an entire season of South Park. Many have argued that the game offers little challenge. The bosses are especially easy, and level grinding is a cinch. But this is a game that's so enjoyable that you won't care blazing through it.
And here, of course, is the breathtaking and lovely Princess Kenny, the fairest maiden in all the kingdom. Don't ask why Kenny wanted to be a chick, it's just how he seems to be rolling right now.
It's one of the few games I wish they would make downloadable content for, and that's saying a hell of a lot coming from a guy that doesn't play RPGs, doesn't watch South Park, and doesn't play many modern games.
You must promise to never, ever fart on anyone's bowels.
Number 6. The only reason I can think of why this game was critically butchered was because of how long it took to make. I'm not an expert on the history, but I remember hearing about this back in the late 90s, and always being frustrated when it seemed that it just wouldn't see the light of day. By the time it came out, I was surprised, and I actually didn't expect much.
You never stop to wonder if it might be...
By the time the game came out, the market was oversaturated with first-person shooters, and all of them seemed to one-up each other. Call of Duty 4 was the most realistic FPS I'd played at the time, so I could understand why Duke Nukem would seem tame to some gamers. But even longtime Duke Nukem fans seemed to dismiss it as an archaic industry joke, made even funnier when it actually hit store shelves. That being said, I beat the game in 3 days. For me, that's an accomplishment. The campaign mode lasts about 15 hours, and today, that's unheard of for most single-player campaigns, which average about half that time. The Duke himself didn't change. Hearing John St. John's voice again just brought back so many nostalgic memories.
Mr. Nukem, will you sign this for me?
Sure, kid, but I better not find this on eBay.
The storyline and supporting characters are so over the top.
Oh, man! That is... I don't understand any of it.
The game knows exactly what it's trying to be, and it doesn't compromise. The alien boobs on the wall, the strip clubs, and most of the levels, they delivered the cheap thrills that you'd expect from this kind of game. What were people expecting, Halo? It doesn't pretend to be anything else but a Duke Nukem game. The price dropped to about $10 just 2 months after its release, but I never felt cheated that I paid full price for it. There are a few flaws. I didn't particularly care for the fact that you were only allowed to use 2 weapons at a time, especially after Duke slams the Halo franchise.
Power armor is for pussies.
And the load times between levels were annoyingly long. Also, there could have been a bigger variety of enemies. Those are the only things that really come to mind. The amount of interactivity, the mindless tasks you need to perform in order to finish levels, and just how anti-feminist the game is.
Strange silicone-based life form.
These are all things that simply characterize the Duke. I don't see why it gets the reputation that it does. I guess people just don't recognize greatness when they see it. I did recognize its greatness, and I had a blast playing it.
What about the game, Duke? Was it any good?
Yeah, but after 12 fucking years, it should be.
Number 5. The original Resident Evil games on PlayStation utilized survival horror in ways that hadn't been done before. Going through the hallways only to have zombified dogs leap through windows to take a bite out of your flesh, while narrowly avoiding zombies and other monsters while conserving your ammo, was a great way to spend your Friday nights, crunched up on your couch under a blanket at 2 o'clock in the morning, sweaty controller in hand. It presented us with a great concept and an involving story that continued to unfold from game to game. That being said, they had their flaws. For starters, I actually prefer just being able to run into a room and gunning down everything in sight. It seemed like I spent a big chunk of that first game running away from things as opposed to standing my ground. It was a unique gaming mechanic, but it could lead to a dead end. Remember going up against a large boss only to have no ammo to fight with? Resident Evil 4 reinvented the series. To hardcore fans, this wasn't necessarily a good thing, as many complained that it went for heavy action and left behind the survival horror aspect, the one thing that grounded the franchise's cutting edge. And it had no zombies, so how could the game possibly be scary? It was scary, alright. Just in a giant mutant crashing through walls, guy carrying a chainsaw that could kill you with one hit kind of way. RE4 is extremely suspenseful, and is one of the only games that I spent hours upon hours playing. It's a hard game. I think my final death count was almost 100, but it also lets you save quite frequently, so you have no choice but to carry on forward. The boss fights are epic, and how can you not grin every time you run across Mr. Merchant?
Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger.
It's a completely satisfying experience, lasting around 20 hours, and there's never a dull moment. The first 3 games had their moments, but nothing left an impression the same way RE4 did. Number 4. I was never a huge fan of the Wii, mainly because aside from the obvious Nintendo classics, it rarely brought anything truly new. The Mario Galaxy games were destined to be classics, as they possess some of the most addictive gameplay in the franchise's history. It's everything I loved about Mario 64 hopped up on steroids. It even plays with our nostalgic senses. The opening, when we see Bowser's airship approaching the Mushroom Kingdom, is an iconic example. It was one of the only adventure games that demonstrated the capabilities of the Wii controls, and the graphics were stunning, especially given that the Wii's graphics almost always failed to impress. Back in my original Top 10 video, I said that Mario 64 one-upped Galaxy because of its replay value, and that still holds true. As fun as Galaxy is, I could only see you playing through it once. This is a huge game, and it'll take more than a weekend to complete it all the way through. You get your money's worth for sure, but sometimes smaller is better. Still, if I had to pick one Mario game from the turn of the century, it doesn't get much better than this. Number 3. I loved me some Mortal Kombat as a teenager. Unfortunately, after Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the series slowly started to go to hell. You could make an argument that the series still retained a loyal fan base with the PS2 games, but the completely switched controls, the contrived storylines, a zombie Liu Kang, really? And all of the new characters left a bad taste in my mouth. Thankfully, the 9th installment rectified all of this, doing a J.J. Abrams and completely rebooting the franchise for the better. It returned to the familiar control scheme of the original games and gave us a kick-ass story mode, not to mention all the other really cool extras that were just as enjoyable as the straight-up arcade mode. But if there's one thing that really sums up my appreciation of the game, I've got just 2 words: Freddy Krueger. As a kid, I loved being the only one in my class to have an infatuation with graphic violence. Nightmare on Elm Street and Mortal Kombat went together like mint ice cream and chocolate chips. The fact that you could now play as Freddy Krueger in a Mortal Kombat game just blew my mind. I swear, if they don't put Jason in the next installment, I am going to flip my shit. It was not a decision, but it definitely made sense in the long run. Having Freddy Krueger fight to the death against Scorpion was so surreal, making him one of my favorite characters in the franchise. Mortal Kombat 2011 went above and beyond the Call of Duty, making it the definitive post-2000 fighting game of choice. Number 2. What's great about this late sequel is that it blends elements of the old and the new, creating a truly eerie experience that is still true to the intense gameplay of the original. When it first came out, it was revolutionary. No one had seen graphics like this before. This one game set the bar for how every first-person shooter would look moving forward, similar to how the original Doom set the bar for every shooter in the 90s. Remember, back in the 90s, if you weren't Doom, you were considered a Doom clone. It has a pretty freakish story as well, but at no point does the plot ever take precedence over the gameplay. It cleverly interweaves the storyline and the gameplay together. The story moves the game along, but the cutscenes are very short, leaving plenty of room for exploration. Having to choose between your flashlight and your gun, it seemed like an irritation at first, but it quickly became a clever new mechanism that forced the player to think on their feet. And unlike Duke's latest incarnation, this one didn't limit how many weapons you could carry at any given time, and it always introduced something new. The deeper you went into the abyss, the more terrifying the monsters became. Remember the first time you got attacked by the Pinky Demon? And having to collect audio discs and data logs that gave you passwords to open lockers was always gratifying. First-person shooters have come a long way, making up more than 80% of the games being played today, and this is the game they owe that to. And the number 1 top post-2000 game. Aside from a few minutes spent playing the original top-down game on PC back in the mid-90s, I never really got into the franchise. I never saw anyone actually beat one of these games. What I did see was my friend running around with a baseball bat, endlessly killing prostitutes, stealing cop cars, and standing on top of hilltops mowing down pedestrians with machine guns and rocket launchers. And the best part, after getting gunned down by cops or chased by a SWAT team, he'd do it all over again. It should have been called Immoral, the game. I didn't learn until years later that there were actual objectives you needed to play through. You mean you could actually advance in the game? Even when all of the expansions came out, I turned a deaf ear. Like online gaming, I just didn't want it to take over my life. Gaming is certainly no replacement for reality. My opinion stayed the same, until this beautiful beast came out. The funny thing is, the only thing that got me to finally crack down and buy it was the trailer that Rockstar released prior to its launch. Any guy who saw that trailer with a group of friends in the same room instantly went out to buy it on launch day. This game is a masterpiece. Not only is it the prettiest game I've ever played, but what game makes you relate to 3 completely unlikable assholes? All 3 of your characters, whether it be Michael, Trevor, or Franklin, are gangsters and they make no excuses for what they do. Trevor is totally batshit crazy, and he's my favorite character in the whole game. The simple act of taking a kidnapped wife back to her abusive husband seems to undo all the other messed up crimes he's committed, and yet we're rooting for the guy like he's the underdog. It's more than just a kick-ass storyline. You can do anything in the game. Almost anything. You want to go to a golf course and beat up their clientele? Coming right up. You want to swim out to sea and swim with the sharks? Hey, dive right in. I was surprised at how much I wanted to do that didn't tie into the main game, and yet there's always a reason to jump right back into the story. This game has been praised enough, but there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about jumping back into the world and just exploring, even months after I completed the campaign. Grand Theft Auto has come a long way since its PC days, and this one is near perfection. If I had created a number 11 spot on that top 10 list, this would have been it.